My name is Ava Callahan. If you follow the financial news in New York or Boston, you might know me by a different name, aka Vale. You probably know me as the founder of a fintech risk analysis firm that predicts market crashes before they happen. You see the magazine covers, the tailored suits, and the interviews where I talk about resilience and grit. But you don't know the actual story. You don't know that the name AK Vale is a shield I built to hide a girl who was erased from existence on the night she turned 18. I am going to tell you exactly what happened. I won't use fancy words to dress it up because there was nothing pretty about it. It was ugly, it was loud, and it broke me. It starts 12 years ago in Greenwich, Connecticut, inside a house that was too big for the 3 people living in it. My father was Richard Callahan. He was a giant in the investment world. He built Callahan Holdings from a small office into an empire. People were terrified of him. I was terrified of him too, but I also respected him. I wanted to be him. Since I was a little kid, I followed him around his office. I listened to his calls. I read the Wall Street Journal while other kids were reading comic books. My mother, Elena, used to tell me to go play outside, but I didn't want to play. I wanted to learn the business. When my mom died 3 years before my 18th birthday, the house changed. It became cold. Richard stopped being a father and started being a CEO 24/7. He looked at me and my older brother, Ethan, like we were employees. And honestly, Ethan was a bad employee. Ethan was 21, handsome, and lazy. He liked spending money, not making it. He failed his college classes. He wrecked cars. He partied on weekdays. But he was the son. In Richard's old-fashioned mind, the son was the heir. I tried to ignore that. I worked harder. I got straight A's. I learned to code. I memorized balance sheets. I thought if I was smart enough, Dad would have to choose me. I was wrong. The night of my 18th birthday should have been a celebration. Instead, it was a performance. Our estate was filled with people I barely knew. There were investors, partners from the firm, and even a few reporters. My father loved an audience. I stood on the patio, wearing a blue silk dress that cost more than most people make in a month. It was uncomfortable. I felt like a prop. Ethan walked up to me with a drink in his hand. He was already tipsy. "Happy birthday, little sister," he said. He had this smirk on his face that I wanted to slap off. "Big night for you." "Thanks, Ethan," I said. "Where is Dad?" "Preparing his speech," Ethan said. He took a sip of his drink. "He has a big announcement. You might want to brace yourself." I felt a little spark of hope. I thought the announcement was about me. I thought he was going to announce that I would be starting an internship at the firm or that he was setting up a trust for my education. I thought he was finally going to acknowledge that I was the smart one. The music stopped. My father walked onto the steps of the patio. He looked impressive in his tuxedo. He held up a hand, and the whole party went silent. That was the power Richard Callahan had. He didn't need to shout to make people listen. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was deep and steady. "Tonight, we celebrate Ava becoming an adult." People clapped politely. I smiled and waved. It felt fake. "But," Richard continued, "I also want to address the future of this family. A legacy is only as strong as the person who carries it." My stomach tightened. This was it. "I have made a decision about the succession of Callahan Holdings," he said. "I have decided to hand the reins of the future entirely to my son, Ethan." The air left my lungs. I stood there, frozen. Ethan? The guy who couldn't even balance his own checkbook? Richard wasn't finished. From this day forward, Ethan is the sole heir to the Callahan estate and the future CEO of our company. He represents the strength of our name. I looked at Ethan. He was beaming. He raised his glass to the crowd. He knew. He had known all along, and he didn't tell me. I couldn't control myself. I was 18, I was angry, and I was hurt. I stepped forward. "Dad," I said. My voice was shaky, but it was loud enough to be heard. The crowd turned to look at me. Richard frowned. He hated interruptions. "Not now, Ava," he said coldly. "What do you mean, Ethan?" I asked. I walked closer to him. "Ethan doesn't care about the company. He doesn't know anything about the business. I've been the one working for this." "Silence," Richard said. "It wasn't a request. It was an order." No, I shouted. This isn't fair. Mom would never have let you do this. She knew I was the one who. I said silence. Richard roared. You can't just give it to him because he's a boy. I yelled back. I was crying now. He's going to ruin everything you built. Richard stepped toward me. His face was red. I had embarrassed him in front of his investors. In front of the press. To Richard Callahan, that was the ultimate sin. He didn't speak. He just swung his hand. The slap was loud. It sounded like a whip crack. It hit me right across the cheek, hard enough to knock me sideways. I stumbled and grabbed a chair to keep from falling. My face burned. The entire party went deathly quiet. You could hear the wind in the trees. Nobody moved. Nobody came to help me. They just watched. I looked up at him holding my cheek. I expected him to look sorry. I expected him to apologize. But he didn't. He looked at me with pure disgust. You are a petulant child, he said. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was speaking in that low, scary voice. You have no discipline. You have no respect. Dad. I whimpered. Do not call me that, he said. If you cannot respect the head of this family, you are not part of this family. He turned to the crowd, then back to me. From this moment on, you are no longer my daughter. You are disowned. I stared at him. You can't be serious. I am always serious, he said. You get nothing. No inheritance. No trust fund. No house. You are cut off. He snapped his fingers. 2 security guards stepped out of the shadows. I knew them. One was named Jerry. He used to drive me to school. He wouldn't look me in the eye. Escort her off the property, Richard said. Dad, stop. I screamed. Where am I supposed to go? That is not my problem, Richard said. He turned his back on me. Ethan, come here. Let's make a toast. Jerry grabbed my arm gently. Miss Ava, please. Just come with us. Let go of me. I struggled, but it was useless. They were big men, and I was just a teenager in heels. They dragged me through the garden, past the staring faces of the people I had known my whole life. Not one of them said a word. Not one of them stepped in to stop it. They were all too afraid of Richard. They marched me to the front gate. The heavy iron gates opened, and they pushed me out onto the street. I'm sorry, miss, Jerry whispered, and then he closed the gate. I heard the lock click. I stood there on the pavement. It was starting to rain. I was wearing a ball gown and one shoe, the other one had fallen off when they dragged me. I had no purse. I had no phone. I had no coat. I banged on the gate. Dad. Ethan. Please. Nothing happened. The music inside started up again. They were going back to the party. They were celebrating my brother's promotion while I stood outside in the dirt. I checked my pockets. Empty. I looked down at my hand. I was wearing one thing of value. It was my mother's ring. It was a vintage sapphire set in platinum. She gave it to me right before she died. She told me to never take it off. It was the only thing I had left in the world. I sat down on the curb and cried until my throat hurt. I waited for an hour. I thought maybe Dad was just trying to teach me a lesson. I thought maybe he would send someone out to get me once the guests left. But the cars started leaving, rolling past me with their tinted windows up. Nobody stopped. Eventually, the lights in the house went out. The gate stayed locked. I realized then that it wasn't a game. My life as Ava Callahan was over. I had no money, no home, and no family. I was completely alone. I stood up. My bare foot bled a little on the asphalt. I wiped my face. The sadness was starting to turn into something else. It was turning into a cold, hard anger. Fine, I said to the closed gate. You want me gone? I'm gone. I started walking toward the town. It was 5 miles away. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. I didn't know how to buy food without a credit card. I didn't know where to sleep. But I knew one thing. I was going to survive. And one day, I was going to make Richard and Ethan Callahan regret this night. I walked into the darkness, holding my mother's ring tight in my fist. That was the end of Act 1 of my life. The survival years were about to begin. The first few weeks were a blur of humiliation. I learned very quickly that the real world doesn't care who your father is, especially when he's cut you off. I slept on a park bench the first night. I was terrified. Every noise made me jump. I held on to that ring like it was a lifeline. The next morning, I walked into a diner. I was dirty, my dress was ruined, and I looked like a crazy person. I asked for water. The waitress, a woman named Sarah, looked at me with pity. She gave me a sandwich too. She didn't charge me. I asked her if they were hiring. "You ever waited tables, honey?" she asked, looking at my manicured nails. "No," I said. "But I learned fast." She gave me a job washing dishes in the back. It paid minimum wage under the table. I found a room in a boarding house that smelled like mold and cigarettes. It was a tiny room with a mattress on the floor and a lock that barely worked. It was a long way from the mansion in Greenwich. For 2 years, that was my life. I worked double shifts. I saved every penny. I learned how to budget. I learned that you can survive on ramen noodles and peanut butter if you have to. I watched my former life from a distance. I saw newspapers in the trash bins with headlines like, "Ava Callahan takes helm at Callahan Holdings." I saw pictures of my brother on yachts, looking tan and happy. It made me sick, but it also fueled me. I started taking night classes at a community college. I couldn't afford a prestigious university anymore, but I didn't need the prestige. I needed the knowledge. I studied coding and advanced statistics. I spent my nights in the library, reading everything I could about algorithmic trading. Then I got sick. It was a bad flu that turned into pneumonia because I was working too much and eating too little. I missed a week of work. The diner owner fired me. I couldn't pay my rent. The landlord told me to get out. I was back at rock bottom. I was sitting on my mattress, coughing, with $5 in my pocket. I had nowhere to go. I looked at my hand. The sapphire ring sparkled in the dim light of the room. It was the only thing I had left of my mother. It was the only thing that proved I used to be someone. But I was hungry, and I was sick, and I was going to be homeless again. I made a choice. I walked to a pawn shop downtown. The broker was a greasy man who looked at the ring with greedy eyes. "It's worth $10,000, I said, my voice hoarse. "I'll give you 2, he said. "It's vintage," I argued. "It's platinum. 3,000. Take it or leave it." I took it. Handing over that ring felt like cutting off a finger. I cried when I walked out of the shop. I felt like I had betrayed my mother. But that money saved my life. It paid for my medicine. It paid for a deposit on a slightly better apartment. And, most importantly, it bought me a cheap laptop. That laptop was my weapon. I went online. I started hanging out in forums for developers and financial analysts. That's where I met Noah Reed. Noah was a brilliant coder who lived in his mom's basement in New Jersey. He had great ideas but no business sense. I had the business sense. We started talking. We realized we were working on the same problem, how to predict market volatility using non-traditional data. We decided to build a tool together. We failed twice. The first version of our software crashed constantly. The second version worked, but nobody wanted to buy it. We were broke. I was eating rice and beans again. Noah was ready to quit. "It's no use, Ava," he told me one night over a video call. "We're nobody. No bank is going to trust a dropout and a guy in a basement." "We are not quitting," I said. I was tired, but I wasn't beaten. "We just need to pivot." We stopped trying to sell the software. We use the software ourselves. We start a small fund. "With what money?" Noah asked. "I have a little left from the ring." I lied. I had almost nothing left. But I took a loan. A predatory loan with high interest. It was a huge risk. If we lost, I would be in debt for the rest of my life. We launched the fund. We called it Vale Analytics. I used my middle name, Kathleen, and took Vale from the street I lived on. AK Vale was born. For the first 6 months, we barely slept. We watched the screens. Our algorithms started working. It predicted a dip in the tech sector, and we shorted the stock. We made $5,000, then $10,000, then $50,000. We were right. The system worked. By the time I was 22, we had made our first $1 million. I paid off the loan. I moved out of the boarding house. By the time I was 25, we were managing $100 million. I hired a team. I bought a real office in Manhattan. I never contacted my family. I never used the name Callahan. To the world, I was A.K. Vale, the mystery woman of Wall Street. I dyed my hair dark. I changed the way I dressed. I wore sharp suits and glasses. Even if I bumped into my father, he probably wouldn't have recognized me. I wasn't the scared girl in the blue dress anymore. I kept tabs on them, though. I had alerts set up for Callahan Holdings. Things were not going well for my brother. At first, the company coasted on the momentum my father had built. But then the headlines started to change. Callahan Holdings misses quarterly targets. CEO Ethan Callahan spotted in Las Vegas during board meeting. Internal strife at Callahan Holdings. Ethan was doing exactly what I said he would do. He was reckless. He tried to expand into markets he didn't understand. He bought companies that were worthless just to make a splash. He fired the old, experienced advisors and hired his drinking buddies. My father was getting old. I saw pictures of him. He looked tired. His hair was completely white. He was trying to fix Ethan's mistakes, but he was losing his touch. And he was too stubborn to admit he had made a mistake in choosing Ethan. Then came the crash. It was 12 years after I was kicked out. I was 30. My firm, Vale Capital, was now a powerhouse. We had billions in assets. I was sitting in my corner office overlooking Central Park when my assistant, Sarah, the same waitress who saved me years ago, I hired her as my office manager as soon as I could afford it, walked in. "You need to see this," she said, handing me a tablet. The headline read, "Callahan Holdings on brink of insolvency. $60 million debt due next month." I read the article. Ethan had leveraged the company to the hilt on a bad real estate deal in Dubai. The deal had collapsed. The creditors were calling in the loans. If they didn't pay $60 million in 30 days, the company would go bankrupt. My father's legacy would be wiped out. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city. This was the moment. "Get me Martin Keller on the phone," I said. Martin was the family attorney, but he also handled deals for distressed companies. He didn't know who I really was. To him, I was just a wealthy investor. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. She knew my story. She was the only one who did. "I'm going to buy the debt," I said. Sarah's eyes widened. "All of it. Every cent," I said. "I want to own Callahan Holdings. But I want it done through a shell company. My name cannot appear on any documents yet. They need to think it's just a private equity firm." "Why save them?" Sarah asked. "After what they did to you?" I touched the bare spot on my finger where my mother's ring used to be. "I'm not saving them," I said coldly. "I'm buying them. There is a difference." The transaction took 2 weeks. My team moved fast. We bought the debt from the banks for cents on the dollar because the banks assumed Callahan was going under. By the time we were done, Vale Capital owned the rights to everything my father had built. We were the primary creditor. We owned the house, the office, the brand. Ethan and Richard celebrated. They thought they had been saved by a lucky break. They released a statement thanking their anonymous partners for their belief in the company. They had no idea that the partner was the daughter they threw out in the rain. I was ready to make my move. I was planning to reveal myself at the next shareholder meeting. I wanted to see the look on Ethan's face when I walked in and told him he worked for me now. But fate intervened. I got a call from a contact at the hospital. Richard Callahan had suffered a massive stroke. He was in the ICU. He wasn't going to make it. I froze. I hated the man. He had abused me and discarded me. But hearing he was dying, it hit me harder than I expected. I didn't go to the hospital. I couldn't risk being seen. I waited. 2 days later, Richard Callahan died. The news was everywhere. End of an era, the papers said. Ethan gave a tearful interview, talking about how much he loved his father and how he would honor his legacy. It made me want to vomit. Then I got a notification. The reading of the last will and testament of Richard Callahan was scheduled for next Friday at the offices of Keller and Associates in Boston. I wasn't invited. Obviously. As far as the legal world knew, I was disinherited. But I decided to go anyway. I told Sarah to clear my schedule. Prepare the jet, I said. We're going to Boston. Are you sure you want to do this? Sarah asked. It's going to be a scene. I'm counting on it, I said. I went to my closet. I picked out a suit. It wasn't blue. It was black. Sharp, tailored, expensive. I put on my heels. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see the 18-year-old girl anymore. I saw a predator. It's time to go home, I whispered to my reflection. This brings us to the day of the will reading. The day everything changes. The first 48 hours were the hardest. You think you know what tired means. You think you know what hungry means. But until you have walked 5 miles in the rain with one shoe, slept on a wooden bench in a public park, and woken up because a police officer is tapping his baton on your shoulder telling you to move along, you don't know anything. I walked into town that first morning. My blue silk dress was stained with mud and grease. My hair was a rat's nest. I looked like a crazy person. I received stares from people walking their dogs and joggers running their morning miles. These were people who lived in my world just yesterday. Now, they crossed the street to avoid me. I found a diner near the train station. It was called the Greasy Spoon, which wasn't clever, but it was honest. I walked in. The smell of bacon and old coffee hit me, and my stomach growled so loud the couple in the corner booth turned to look. I sat at the counter. I didn't have a penny. I didn't know what I was doing. A waitress walked over. Her name tag said Sarah. She looked to be about 30, with tired eyes and a kind face. She looked at my dress. She looked at my dirty feet. She didn't ask what happened. She just poured a glass of water and set it in front of me. You look like you had a rough night, honey, she said. I did, I said. My voice was cracked. I don't have any money. I just need to sit here for a minute. Sarah looked around to make sure her manager wasn't watching. She went to the kitchen and came back with a plate of toast and scrambled eggs. Eat, she said. It's on me. I ate it in 2 minutes. I had never tasted anything so good in my life. Not the filet mignon at the country club, not the lobster in the Hamptons. Those cold, rubbery eggs were the best meal I ever had. Thank you, I said, wiping my mouth with a paper napkin. I need a job. Do you know anyone hiring? Sarah laughed. It was a dry, cynical sound. Dress like that? You won't get hired at a bank, sweetheart. I'll do anything, I said. I can wash dishes. I can scrub floors. I don't care. She looked at me for a long moment. She saw something in my face. Maybe she saw the desperation. Maybe she saw that I wasn't on drugs, just broken. The dishwasher quit yesterday, she said. It pays minimum wage. Under the table if you don't have papers. $7 an hour. I'll take it, I said. That was how Ava Callahan, heiress to $1 billion fortune, became a dishwasher. For the next 6 months, my life was a cycle of heat, steam, and exhaustion. I worked 12-hour shifts. My hands, which used to get manicures every week, became red and raw. The skin peeled. My fingernails broke. I smelled like old frying oil and bleach. I rented a room in a boarding house 3 blocks away. It wasn't really a room. It was a closet with a mattress. The walls were thin. I could hear the man next door coughing all night. I could hear the couple upstairs fighting. I bought clothes from a thrift store. Jeans that were too big, t-shirts that were faded. I cut my hair short myself with a pair of kitchen scissors because I couldn't afford a salon, and the long hair kept getting caught in the dishwasher. I was miserable, but I was also learning. I learned the value of $1. Literally. I learned that $1 could buy a can of beans or a bus ticket, but not both. I learned that rich people talk about money like it's a game, but poor people talk about money like it's oxygen. You don't think about anything else when you don't have it. I tried to save. I put cash in a sock under my mattress. But something always happened. The landlord raised the rent. I needed new shoes because the old ones fell apart. I got a toothache and had to pay a dentist cash to pull it because I couldn't afford a filling. 1 year passed. Then 2. I kept tabs on my family. I went to the public library on my days off and used the free computers. I read the financial news. Ethan Callahan named CEO of Callahan Holdings. Ethan Callahan announces new luxury condo project in Miami. Ethan Callahan spotted on yacht with models. He looked happy. He looked successful. My father was quoted in the articles, saying how proud he was. Ethan has the vision, Richard said. He is taking the company to new heights. I sat in that library, staring at the screen, my hands clenched into fists. They had erased me. It was like I never existed. They didn't look for me. They didn't care if I was dead or alive. That anger was the only thing that kept me warm at night. Then came the winter of the third year. It was a brutal winter. The heating in my boarding house broke. The landlord was a slumlord who didn't care. I slept in my coat. I caught a cold. I kept working because if I didn't work, I didn't eat. The cold turned into a flu. The flu turned into pneumonia. I woke up one morning and I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was filled with concrete. I was burning up with fever. I tried to stand up and fell back onto the mattress. I missed 3 days of work. I didn't have a phone to call Sarah. When I finally dragged myself to the diner, the manager, not Sarah, but the owner, a man named Miller, stopped me at the door. "You're fired," he said. "Please," I wheezed. I was sick. "I don't care," he said. "I need reliable people. Get out." I walked back to my room. The landlord was waiting for me. "Rent's due," he said. "I need a few days," I said. "You have until tonight," he said. "Or I throw your stuff on the street." I went into my room and sat on the floor. I was shivering. I was hungry. I was jobless. I had $5 in my pocket. This was it. This was the end. I was going to die on the street, and my father would never even know. I looked down at my hand. I was still wearing it. The sapphire ring. My mother's ring. I had promised myself I would never sell it. I had starved rather than sell it. It was the only proof I had that I came from somewhere, that I was loved once. But I wanted to live. I took the ring off. It left a pale mark on my finger. I put it in my pocket and walked to the pawn shop on Main Street. The wind cut through my thin coat. The pawnbroker was a man with yellow teeth and thick glasses. He took the ring and looked at it under a loupe. "Nice stone," he grunted. "Platinum setting." "It's vintage," I said. My voice was weak. "It's worth $10,000. He laughed. "In a retail store, maybe. Here, I have to resell it. I have overhead." "How much?" I asked. $2,000, he said. "That's robbery," I said. "Please. I need the money." $2,500, he said. "Final offer." I looked at the ring one last time. I thought about my mother. I thought about how she used to wear it when she played the piano. "Okay," I whispered. He counted out the money. $2,500. It was a stack of bills. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt like blood money. I walked out of the shop. I didn't pay the landlord. I packed my bag and left the boarding house. I checked into a cheap motel that had heat. I went to a pharmacy and bought antibiotics. I bought hot soup. I slept for 2 days. When I woke up, the fever was gone. And something had changed in me. I looked at the money on the table. I had about $2,000 left. I could use it to pay rent for a few months. I could use it to buy food. But then it would be gone, and I would be back to washing dishes. No. I took the bus to an electronics store. I bought a laptop. It wasn't top of the line, but it had a good processor. I bought a portable Wi-Fi hotspot. I had about $500 left. I went back to the motel room. I opened the laptop. I logged onto the internet. I wasn't Ava Callahan anymore. Ava Callahan was the girl with the ring. That girl was gone. I went to a coding forum. I had been reading about a new type of risk analysis algorithm. I knew the math. I had learned it from my father's books. But I didn't know how to build the code structure. I posted a message. Looking for a partner. Backend developer needed for high-frequency trading algorithm. No pay yet. Huge potential. Most people ignored it. But one person replied. His username was Codebreaker88. "What's the math based on?" he asked. "Volatility clustering and sentiment analysis," I replied. "Interesting," he wrote. "Let's talk." His real name was Noah Reed. He was 22, the same age as me. He lived in his mother's basement in New Jersey. We got on a video call. He had messy hair and wore a faded hoodie. He looked at me, a girl in a cheap motel room with short, jagged hair, and he didn't judge. "You speak the language," he said. "Where did you learn finance?" "Self-taught." I lied. "I read a lot." "Okay," he said. "I can build the engine. You build the logic. What's the plan?" "We build a tool that predicts market crashes," I said. "We sell the data to hedge funds." "Ambitious," Noah said. "I like it." We worked for 3 months. I lived off ramen noodles. Noah worked at night after his shift at a grocery store. We built the software. We called it Project Phoenix. We finished the prototype. I started cold emailing hedge funds. I sent hundreds of emails. "Dear sir, we have a tool that can save you millions." Silence. Rejections. "Not interested." "Who are you? Stop emailing us." Nobody wanted to buy software from two nobodies. My money ran out. Noah was getting frustrated. "It's not working, Ava," he said one night. "The code is good, but they don't trust us. We have no track record." He was right. In the finance world, trust is everything. And we had none. I was sitting in a coffee shop, using their free Wi-Fi because my hotspot data had run out. I was looking at the screen. The algorithm was running a simulation. It was flashing red. "Noah," I said. "Look at the screen." "What?" "The system. It's predicting a massive drop in the retail sector tomorrow. It says big retail chains are going to miss earnings reports." "So," Noah said, "nobody is buying the data." I closed my eyes. I thought about my father. Richard Callahan didn't become rich by selling software. He became rich by taking risks. "We don't sell the data," I said. "We use it." "What do you mean?" "We trade," I said. "We open a brokerage account. We bet against the market." "With what money?" Noah asked. "I have $200 in my bank account." "I have 50, I said. It wasn't enough. We needed capital. I did something reckless. I applied for a credit card. A high-interest, predatory credit card that targeted people with bad credit. They gave me a $2,000 limit. "I'm putting $2,000 on a short position," I told Noah. "If the market goes down, we make money. If it goes up, I'm in debt forever." "You're crazy," Noah said. "Do you trust the code?" I asked him. He paused. "Yes, I trust the code." "Then let's do it." I placed the trade. My hands were shaking. I shorted a basket of retail stocks. The next morning, I stared at the screen. The market opened. For the first hour, nothing happened. The stocks were flat. I felt sick. Then, at 10 a.m., the earnings report started coming out. Target missed earnings. Walmart missed earnings. The news broke that consumer spending was down. The lines on the chart turned red. They dropped like stones. My account balance started to move. $2,000, $2,500, $4,000, $8,000. I watched the numbers climb. I wasn't breathing. By the time the market closed, the account balance was $14,000. We had made $12,000 in 6 hours. I called Noah. I was crying. "It works, Noah. It works." "Holy **T was all he said. We didn't stop there. We reinvested everything. We compounded the money. We worked 18 hours a day. We improved the algorithm. We started trading options, which were riskier but had higher returns. 6 months later, we had $500,000. We incorporated. We needed a name. Callahan Capital? Noah suggested. He didn't know my real identity, but he knew my last name. "No," I said sharply. "That name is dead." I thought about my mother. Her maiden name was Vale. She was the only person who had ever believed in me without conditions. "Vale," I said. "Vale Analytics." "And your title?" Noah asked. "CEO." "Yes," I said. "But I need a new name for the public. I don't want anyone to know who I am." I wrote it down on a napkin. A.K. Vale. A for Ava. K for Kathleen, my middle name. A.K. Vale, Noah said. Sounds mysterious. Sounds like a guy. Good, I said. Let them think I'm a guy. Let them think I'm a machine. I don't care what they think, as long as they pay. We moved out of the motel. We rented a small office in Jersey City. We hired 2 junior coders. We weren't just trading anymore. We were managing a small fund. I bought my first suit in 4 years. It was black, sharp, and tailored. I looked in the mirror. The girl who washed dishes was gone. The girl who cried at the gate was gone. A.K. Vale stared back at me. She looked cold. She looked dangerous. I was ready. But while I was rising, my family was falling. I set up Google alerts for Callahan Holdings. The headlines were getting worse. Callahan Holdings debt rating downgraded to junk status. Asterisk. SEC investigating accounting irregularities at Callahan subsidiary. Asterisk. Ethan Callahan sells family vacation home in Aspen to cover losses. Asterisk. Ethan was destroying it. He was arrogant and stupid. He was surrounding himself with yes men who were bleeding the company dry. My father was too old to stop him and too proud to admit he was wrong. I watched it all happen from my office. Every time Ethan made a mistake, my firm made money. I bet against his companies. I shorted his stock. I was profiting from his failure. It felt like justice. Then came the big one. It was 12 years after I left. My assistant, Sarah, yes, I hired Sarah from the diner. As soon as I made my first million, I went back to the greasy spoon, walked in wearing my suit, and offered her a job as my office manager for triple her salary.
She cried.
She was the only one who knew the truth. Sarah walked into my office with a tablet. You need to see this, boss, she said. I looked at the news. Callahan Holdings faces bankruptcy. Emergency liquidation likely. Ethan had bet the farm on a massive real estate deal in Dubai. The deal had collapsed. The bank was calling in a $60 million loan. They didn't have the cash. If they didn't pay in 30 days, the company would be seized. My father's legacy, the company he loved more than his own daughter, would be sold for parts. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. I had billions under management now. $60 million was a lot of money, but for A.K. Vale, it was a write-off. I could let them fail. I could watch Ethan lose everything. It would be the ultimate revenge. But then I thought about my mother. I thought about the hours I spent in my father's office as a little girl. I didn't want the company to die. I wanted the company to be mine. Sarah, I said, get Martin Keller on the phone. Martin Keller was my father's attorney, but he also worked with distressed assets. He didn't know A.K. Vale was Ava Callahan. What's the play? Sarah asked. We're going to buy the debt, I said. All of it. Every cent. We are going to become the sole creditor of Callahan Holdings. We will own them. They'll know it's you, Sarah warned. No, I said. Use a shell company. Phoenix Trust. Keep my name off the paperwork until the very last second. I bought the debt. I saved the company. Ethan and my father celebrated in the press, thanking their anonymous savior. They thought they had gotten lucky. They had no idea the wolf was already inside the house. I was planning to reveal myself at the annual gala. I was going to walk in and fire my brother in front of everyone. But life is never that simple. A week later, I got the intel. Richard Callahan had a massive stroke. He was in the hospital. He wasn't coming out. I sat in my office in the dark. My father was dying. The man who slapped me. The man who disowned me. I didn't go to see him. I couldn't. But I felt a strange hollowness in my chest. Then he died. The funeral was televised. I watched it on mute. Ethan looked fake sad. He was probably worried about the stock price. 2 days after the funeral, I received a notification. The reading of the will. It was scheduled for Friday at Keller's office in Boston. I wasn't invited. Prepare the jet, I told Sarah. You're going? She asked. I have a meeting with my debtors, I said, my voice hard. And my brother has a surprise coming. I packed my bag. I put on my most expensive suit. I didn't have my mother's ring anymore, but I had something better. I had the deed to their entire lives. This brings us to the will reading. The moment I had waited 12 years for. The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor of the Prudential Center in Boston took exactly 45 seconds. I counted them. I was standing in the back of the car, watching the numbers tick up. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. I checked my reflection in the polished steel doors one last time. The woman staring back at me didn't look like Ava Callahan. She didn't look like the girl who had been dragged out of a garden party in tears. She looked like A.K. Vale. I was wearing a black tailored suit that cost more than my first car. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I wore no jewelry except for a simple watch. I didn't need to look rich. I needed to look like I owned the building. The doors opened. The lobby of Keller and Associates was exactly as I remembered it from when I was a child. Marble floors, leather chairs, and a hushed silence that smelled like money and fear. The receptionist looked up. She was young, probably new.
She didn't know who I was.
"Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here for the reading of the Richard Callahan will," I said. My voice was calm, flat. She looked at her list. She frowned. "I don't see your name here, miss."
"Check again," I said.
"Or just ask Martin Keller. Tell him the creditor is here." She blinked, confused, but she picked up the phone. She whispered something, her eyes widening as she listened to the response. She hung up slowly. "Mr. Keller says you can go right in. Conference room B." I walked down the long hallway. The heels of my shoes clicked against the marble. It sounded like a countdown. I reached the double mahogany doors of conference room B. I didn't knock. I pushed them open and walked inside. The conversation in the room stopped instantly. It was like someone had cut the power cord. There were about 15 people sitting around the massive oval table. I recognized all of them. There was my Aunt Linda, who used to send me birthday cards with $5 in them until the day I was disowned, and then she ghosted me. There was Cousin Mark, who is currently working as a consultant for the firm, which meant he got paid to do nothing. And at the head of the table, sitting in the chair that should have been my father's, was Ethan. He looked older than 33. His face was puffy, like he hadn't slept in a week. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too tight. He was holding a glass of water, and his hand was shaking just a little bit. When he saw me, he didn't look scared. He looked annoyed, like I was a fly that had buzzed into the room. "What is she doing here?" Ethan asked, not talking to me, but to the lawyer at the other end of the table. Martin Keller stood up. He was an old man now with white hair and spectacles. He had been my father's attorney for 40 years. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity anymore.
It was respect.
"I allowed her in, Ethan," Martin said. "Why?" Ethan demanded. He stood up, slamming his hand on the table. "She was disowned. She has no legal standing here. She's not family." He turned to face me. He looked me up and down, sneering at my suit. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Ava," he said. "Did you run out of money? Did you finally come crawling back to beg for a handout?" The room was silent. Everyone was watching, waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to scream. I walked to the only empty chair at the opposite end of the table. I pulled it out and sat down. I placed my leather portfolio on the table in front of me. I folded my hands. "I'm not here for money, Ethan," I said. My voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. "And I'm not here to beg. I'm here because I have business with this estate." "Security," Ethan yelled toward the door. "Get her out of here."
"Sit down, Ethan," Martin Keller said.
His voice was sharp. "The reading cannot proceed until all interested parties are present. And she is an interested party." Ethan looked at Martin, then at me. He looked confused. He clearly thought this was some sort of sentimental gesture by the old lawyer. He huffed and sat back down, crossing his arms. "Fine," Ethan spat. "Let her stay. Let her see exactly how much she isn't getting. It might be good for her to see what she threw away." I didn't react. I just watched him. He had no idea. Martin Keller cleared his throat. He opened the heavy leather binder in front of him. "We are gathered here to read the last will and testament of Richard Callahan," Martin began. "This document was updated 3 days before his death." Ethan frowned. Updated? I didn't know about an update.
He was very specific, Martin said.
He wanted to make sure everything was in order. Martin began to read.
The first part was standard.
It was exactly what everyone expected. To my sister, Linda, I leave the summer cottage in Maine and a stipend of $50,000. Aunt Linda sniffled loudly into a handkerchief. To my nephew, Mark, I leave my collection of vintage automobiles. Mark pumped his fist silently. To my son, Ethan. Ethan sat up straighter. He fixed his tie. He looked at me with a smug grin. To my son, Ethan, I leave the family estate in Greenwich, the apartment in Paris, and the entirety of my personal art collection. I also leave him the title of CEO of Callahan Holdings, provided he maintains a majority share in the company. Ethan let out a long breath. He looked like he had just won the lottery. See, Ava, he whispered across the table. Everything, just like he promised. I stayed silent. I knew how wills worked. The assets come first. The liabilities come second. Martin Keller paused. He took a sip of water. He looked uncomfortable. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Ethan. However, Martin said, the bequest of the company stock is subject to the current financial standing of Callahan Holdings. We know. Ethan waved his hand dismissively.
The debt.
But we have that covered. We have the new investor. The private equity firm. Yes, Martin said. The debt. He turned a page. As of the date of Richard Callahan's death, Callahan Holdings was insolvent. The company owed $60 million to various creditors. This debt was purchased in full by a single entity last week. Right, Ethan said. Phoenix Trust. They saved us. They're going to restructure the loan. I'm meeting with their rep next week. Actually, Martin said, the representative of the creditor is here today. Ethan froze. He looked around the room. He looked at the door, expecting someone to walk in.
Who?
Ethan asked. Martin Keller closed the binder. He pointed a finger down the long mahogany table.
He pointed directly at me.
The debt is owned by Vale Capital, Martin said. And the sole owner of Vale Capital is Ms. Ava Callahan. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody moved. The silence was so heavy it felt like pressure in my ears. Ethan looked at Martin. Then he looked at me. Then he laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched laugh. That's a joke, he said. That's a good one, Martin. Ava? She's a dishwasher. She's a nobody. She doesn't have $60, let alone $60 million. I didn't speak. I reached into my portfolio. I pulled out a stack of documents. They were wire transfer receipts, the deed of sale for the debt, and the incorporation papers of Vale Capital. I slid them across the table. They stopped right in front of Ethan. He picked them up. His hands were shaking so badly, the papers rattled. He read the top page. He read the signature at the bottom. A.K. Vale. He looked up at me, his face draining of color. He looked like he was going to be sick. A.K. Vale, he whispered. That's you? You're the Vulture Fund? I'm the fund that bought your mistakes, Ethan, I said. Every bad deal. Every toxic loan. I bought it all. But how? He dropped the papers. You were destitute. You had nothing. I worked, I said. While you were partying in Vegas, I was building an algorithm. While you were sinking Dad's company, I was building my own. The room was in chaos.
Aunt Linda was gasping.
Mark was staring at me with his mouth open. This can't be legal, Ethan stammered. Dad wouldn't allow this.
He disowned you.
You can't own his company. She doesn't just own the company, Ethan. Martin Keller interrupted softly.
She owns you.
The terms of the debt purchase give her full controlling interest until the $60 million is repaid. Unless you have $60 million in your pocket right now, she is your boss. Ethan slumped back in his chair. He looked defeated. But Martin wasn't finished. There is one more thing, Martin said. There is a personal letter. From Richard. A letter? I asked. This I didn't know about. Martin pulled a sealed white envelope from the binder. He wrote this the night before he died. He gave me strict instructions to read it only if Ava was present in the room. My heart skipped a beat. My father had written to me, Martin broke the seal. He unfolded the handwritten note. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was sharp, jagged, aggressive. To my children, Martin read. I have spent my life building a monument to the name Callahan. I thought the only way to protect that monument was to give it to the son who bore the name. I thought strength looked like tradition. I thought loyalty meant obedience. Martin paused. He looked at Ethan, who was staring at the table. I was wrong. Martin continued reading. I spent the last month of my life investigating the company that was buying our debt. I wanted to know who was coming for my legacy. When my investigators told me it was A.K. Vale, and when they told me who A.K. Vale really was, I was angry at first. I gripped the edge of the table. He knew. He had known before he died. But then, the letter went on. I looked at the numbers. I looked at the strategy. I saw a company built from nothing, with no help, no inheritance, no safety net. I saw the kind of ruthless intelligence that I used to have. Martin took a breath. I realized that I disowned the wrong child. I cast out the one who was strong enough to survive, and I kept the one who was weak enough to need me. Ethan made a sound like he had been punched in the gut. Ethan, the letter read. I love you, but you are not a king. You are a courtier. You cannot lead this family. Ava, Martin read my name. I do not ask for your forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I was a hard man and I made a hard choice. But I see you now. You are the only one who could save what I built. Not because I gave it to you, but because you took it. That is what a Callahan does. Martin lowered the paper. The letter ends there, he said. The room was absolutely silent. I felt tears stinging the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't sad. I was vindicated. For 12 years, I had carried the shame of that night in the garden. I had carried the label of the failure. And now, from the grave, my father had admitted the truth. Ethan stood up slowly. He looked broken. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. He looked like a little boy. He knew. Ethan whispered. He knew it was you, and he didn't tell me. He wanted to see if you could fix it yourself, I said. He gave you a chance, Ethan. Until the very end. Why did you do it? Ethan asked. His voice cracked. Why did you save us? After I laughed when they dragged you out? After I let you sleep on the street? I looked at him. I thought about the answer. I didn't do it for you, I said. And I didn't do it for him. I stood up and walked over to the window. I looked out at the Boston skyline. I did it for Mom, I said. She built this company too. She was the one who kept the books in the beginning. She was the one who calmed Dad down when he wanted to do something crazy. Her blood is in this company. I wasn't going to let you flush it down the toilet. I turned back to the table. So here's the situation, I said. I was in full CEO mode now. I own the debt. That means I own the voting rights. Effective immediately, I am dissolving the current board of directors. Ethan's eyes widened. You can't do that. I just did, I said. I am also seizing the assets of the estate to pay down the interest on the loans. The house in Greenwich? It's going on the market. The collection of cars? Sold. But I have nowhere to live, Ethan stammered. The will said the house is mine. The will gives you the house, I explained coldly. But the house is collateral for the company's debt. And since I own the debt, I'm calling it in. Ethan looked at Martin Keller for help. Martin just shook his head. She's right, Ethan. It's legal. Ethan sank to his knees. Literally. He fell to the carpet in his expensive suit. It was a pathetic sight. Please, Ava, he begged. Don't do this. Don't take everything. I don't know how to do anything else. This is my whole life. I looked down at him. This was the moment I had dreamed of for 12 years. This was the revenge. I could crush him. I could leave him with nothing, just like he left me. I could make him wash dishes. I could make him sleep on a bench. It would be fair. It would be poetic justice. But then I remembered the letter. I realized I disowned the wrong child. My father had been a cruel man. He believed that power meant destroying everyone who stood in your way. He believed that family was just a business arrangement. If I destroyed Ethan, I would just be Richard Callahan in a skirt. I would be proving that his blood ran thicker than my mother's. I looked at Ethan, kneeling on the floor, weeping. I didn't feel triumph. I felt pity.
Get up, I said.
Ethan looked up, wiping his eyes. What? Get up, I repeated. You look pathetic. He scrambled to his feet. I'm not going to destroy you, Ethan, I said. The room exhaled. I'm not Dad, I said. I don't throw family out in the rain. I walked over to the table and picked up the stack of documents. I am taking over as CEO, I said. That is non-negotiable. You are incompetent, and you will drive this company into the ground if you stay in charge. Ethan nodded quickly. Okay. I understand. But, I continued, I will keep you on the board. You will have a salary. You will keep the house in Greenwich, but you will sign a contract stating that you cannot sell it or leverage it. Ethan looked like he was about to faint with relief. You do that?
Why?
I looked him dead in the eye. Because 12 years ago, you watched me lose everything and you did nothing, I said. Today, I have the power to do the same to you. And I am choosing not to. That is the difference between you and me. I turned to Martin Keller. Draw up the papers, Martin. I want the transition to start Monday. Yes, Miss Callahan, Martin said, smiling. I picked up my portfolio. I didn't say goodbye to Aunt Linda or Cousin Mark. They didn't matter. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at Ethan. He was still standing there, looking at me like I was an alien.
One more thing, Ethan, I said.
Yes. The next time you have a birthday party,
don't invite me.
I walked out of the conference room. I walked back down the hall, past the stunned receptionist. I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, I let out a long breath. My hands started to shake, just a little. The adrenaline was fading. I took my phone out of my pocket. I dialed a number. Hello. Sarah's voice answered.
It's done, I said.
How did it go? She asked. Did you burn it down? No, I said, watching the numbers tick down. I bought it, and I kept the tenants. You're a better person than I am, Sarah laughed. Are you coming back to the office?
Not yet, I said.
I have one stop to make first. I walked out of the building and hailed a cab. Where to, lady? The driver asked. The cemetery, I said. Greenwood Memorial. I needed to visit a grave. Not my father's. I had nothing to say to him. His letter was his final word, and my mercy to Ethan was mine. I went to my mother's grave. It was simple under a large oak tree. I stood there for a long time. The wind was blowing, but it didn't feel cold anymore. I touched the tombstone. I did it, Mom, I whispered. I got it back. I stood there for a while longer, just listening to the leaves rustle. Then I turned around and walked back toward the city. I had a company to run. I had a legacy to rebuild. And for the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I had finally arrived.